What was the biggest bullet you dodged?
A few years ago I had pneumonia, but my whole family insisted that it was just post-nasal drip, which runs in the family. After a week or two I woke up in the middle of the night when I couldn't feel my arm. After I got to the doctor said that it was the worst he'd ever seen and he was surprised I wasn't dead. I had 3 pounds of mucus cut out of my lungs and another 2 weeks in the hospital siphoning out the rest. For 3 months afterwards I could barely walk half a mile without starting to pass out, and I still can't run for more than 200 to 300 yards without collapsing. Many years ago, my flight had just landed at Chicago O'Hare and the plane was taxiing when the pilot suddenly slammed on the brakes. People were literally thrown forward against the seat in front of them. A few seconds later, another plane, taking off I think, went screaming by right in front of us. No explanation was given, though our imaginations provided a lot of gory details. Around 30,000 pounds. I was driving with my wife in town one snowy evening and we had pulled up to a stoplight. I happened to glance up at the rear view mirror and saw a city bus heading towards us, and rotating sideways. I hit the gas and pulled ahead into the intersection and left into the turning lane, and less than a second later, the bus went sliding through right where our car was. It came to a stop on the other side of the intersection and fortunately didn't hit anything, but 1 second or 2 feet difference and we would have had some nice spinal injuries. My dad was a truck driver in the oilfield in Canada. He worked a lot of long hours and every single day. So on weekends he would bring me and my younger brother on some of his jobs. We were on location and my little brother, 3 years, and me, 10 years, were waiting for him playing in cab of truck. My little brother opened the passenger door and my little arms closed it. Job's done. We start our trek home going about 35 kilometers per hour and the door flies open and I get sucked out of truck. I remember doing about 10 back flips as I tumbled out, hitting the ground on my back a few times and rolling my way to a stop. I stood up before the truck was even stopped in absolute shock. Next thing I see my dad looking for me and he burst into tears. First time I ever seen him cry. I'm 33 now and he still won't talk to me about it. Luckily the rig was in a farmer's field. So when we were leaving I landed on softer dirt. Not a single scratch on me. Dad thought he ran over me with trailer. Don't think we ever went to work with Dad again. I work for the company now. As a kid, after running errands in town with my mom, I was climbing into the backseat of our family station wagon. A semi-truck hit a power line pole down the street, causing the still live wire to fall, bounce off the roof of the car and hang across the open door just a foot or two above my legs. Raised Catholic, I wondered for a while after if I had actually died that day and that the rest of what I thought was my life was my purgatory. A friend had lost his job under suspicious circumstances. A few weeks later he asked me to take him to the bank. As I got near to pick him up I caught a train. He called to say never mind, he would get someone else. A few days later a friend sent out a message to a large number of our friends. This guy lost his job and was running a check cashing con. Can you cash this check for me? I'll pay you $50 if you do. The check is $500. He has no backing funds. You eat the whole amount. He did this to several friends in a few days to amass a few grand and was about to skip town when the cops got him. Not me, but I had a field service engineer working on one of my big robotic liquid handlers. He decided to bypass the safety pin that prevents the heads from moving while the cover is open while he had a diagnostic program queued up on the computer. What he didn't know was that the instant he reinserted the safety pin the machine would execute the cued instructions and start moving, and he had a hand inside it right in the danger zone. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked his hand out an instant before it was crushed. He stopped ignoring me when I told him to stop bypassing safety lockouts to save a few minutes. Was going to move to a different apartment complex last month. Got injured at work and lost hours, therefore, couldn't come up with the deposit money in time. Last week some asshat was cooking meth and caught the building on fire. Edit. My username. My current apartment complex is notorious in my city for having elevator troubles, so in reality, username does check out. Also, you could say I dodged 2 bullets. Point 1, the fire. 2. I know, bad stuff happens everywhere blah blah blah, but the new place really didn't strike me as the kind of place where meth heads live. So I guess avoiding those kind of people for neighbors was dodging a bullet in itself. Hubs, my sister, and I were hanging out around my parents' house on a very boring 4th of July. We decided to wash my husband's new car sitting in the driveway because it was hot out and an excuse to play in the hose. We were literally walking out the front door, and I said, "Hey, we should eat lunch before we get all wet and stuff," and everyone agreed, so we turned around and went back inside. I was warming up something in the microwave, a Hot Pocket I think, and all of a sudden I hear the loudest bang I think I've ever heard, from the direction of the front door. Hubs and I look at each other wide-eyed and run outside. I was greeted by the back end of a Crown Vic, smoking something fierce, plowed into the tree in the middle of our yard. For a split second I was just stunned, then screamed to my sister inside to call 911. I looked over to the driveway, at the car we had been planning to wash just 5 minutes ago. Totaled. Completely totaled. Brand new 2011 G6, destroyed. Guy hit it so hard it did a complete 90-degree turn across the driveway. He actually hit it so hard, it ended up ricocheting and hitting the other cars in the driveway, mauling 2 other cars. Yard was fucked, Crown Vic was fucked, tree was fucked.
We immediately assumed it was drunk driving. Being the fourth and all, I went over to the driver's side and found a very old man, very bewildered, unable to comprehend what I was saying but conscious. I will never forget the look he gave me, confused, helpless, scared. I was on the line with the paramedics as they sent over the ambulances, and tried my best to follow their instructions. My sister was only 14 at the time, so I handled the call. Turns out dude was diabetic and had passed out behind the wheel due to low blood sugar, hit the gas pedal with his weight as he passed out, and was plowing down our residential street at about 65 miles per hour. He jumped the curb, drove down the sidewalk, past another house, then slammed into my husband's car, and subsequently, the tree. If we had been anywhere near that yard, driveway, I have no doubt one or all of us would have been seriously injured or dead. It was sheer dumb luck and timing that saved us. Huge bullet dodged, or should I say, huge car dodged.
My mother left me in one state and went back to my abusive stepfather. She tried to get me to drop out of my senior year at HS, move back to their state and just get my GED. They wanted a live-in babysitter, cook and maid. I was so lucky my grandparents let me move in with them and finish school. Edit. Thanks for all the love, guys. For those who have asked, I'm doing great. I've gone no contact with my mother and stepfather, they're still together, and it's been one of the most healthy decisions I've made. My husband and my kids are amazing and she's missing out big time. My grandparents are alive and well and are still involved in our lives. My high school sweetheart and fiancé was my bullet. He ghosted me out of nowhere, no explanation, just gone. So needless to say, no wedding. I sent the ring back to his mom cause I didn't want it and was pissed. I go on to live a great life, find a wonderful guy, and we have been happily married for 21 years. 25 years later I find out that my old flame had been arrested for underage solicitation, sexting underage girls, possession of child porn, and many charges of sex with minors. Apparently Mr. Big Man in his community was arrested in a sting operation after this 12-year-old girl's parents found a whole series of explicit texts and had found that he set up a romantic hotel room get-together for them. Police pretended to be her and he was caught in the parking lot of the hotel. Even better, he was married to the same chick he was apparently seeing while we were together, and had a couple of kids. All around the same age of his victims. Yeah, before finding all this out, I regretted for a long time that we didn't work. After finding out this had been going on for at least 20 years, I was rather glad I got ghosted. Never been so glad to dodge a bullet. Edit. Thank you for the awards. But if you can, please donate to local child abuse centers or battered women and children's shelters. They need help, especially this year. Edit 2. Apparently I wasn't clear in the sequence of events. He was arrested 5 years ago and the sexting were part of the charges against him at that time. I have heard rumors from various people that he was active in the chat rooms back in the day, so he may have very well been involved with underage people that way as well, but I have no proof of that, only rumors. Years ago I lived in Vancouver and liked to go for long walks, beautiful city to do so. I was heading to a friend's first to drop something off and cut through a neighborhood with a lot of Southeast Asian immigrants. The ones I got to talk to were mostly from Vietnam. I was aware of a van behind me, but it was midday and there were people out, so it was only a passing thought. A lady was working in her garden, and as I approached her house she started to look behind me. Then she came out onto the sidewalk and started talking to me in her native language. I understood none of it, but her body language was agitated. She kept gesturing to me to come with her up their walkway. As I looked behind me, I see 3 men getting out of the van, which is now parked just behind me. By this point the woman has a good grip on my arm and has me dragged almost to her porch. She kept talking to me and pointing to stuff in her garden, and I just listened, nodded, and kept a good eye on the men and van. I don't remember how long we were there, but the men finally left. Both myself and the woman let out huge sighs of relief. She then patted me on the arm, said something, and then went back to her gardening. I booted it to my friend's house. On the news the next day was the story of a woman who was kidnapped and gang raped. The victim was grabbed on the next street over from the woman's house, not long after my encounter with her, by 5 men in a van. The men were distinctive and the description of the men and van fit the ones I had seen. That woman saved me from something horrible and I am forever thankful. Not my story, but a girl I knew had had a few drinks and decided to hitchhike home, a town about 40 minutes away from the one she'd been drinking in. Note it is very common for people to hitchhike in this area. She gets picked up by a car of guys, all seems fine until she points out they can drop her off just up ahead, and they keep driving. She had that instant sober feeling. She plays it off like she's clueless and totally down to keep hanging out with them, acting like she's very drunk. Meanwhile they're back in more forested area of the highway. Then she fake dry heaves and says she about to puke, really putting on a show, so they stop to let her out. She books it into the bushes and just doesn't look back until she's safe. Edit. Oh my gosh you guys, not even my story, stop giving me awards. To answer some common things in comments, from what I'm aware of no charges were ever pressed. By the time she made it to safety they would have been long gone and she had no info like names, license plate or anything. Yes, smart idea once in that situation, definitely not smart to be in that situation in the first place though. Edit 2. I just remembered another, not mine but equals my mom as a late teen, early 20s-ish was with a group of friends out drinking one night and one girl wanted to hitchhike, the others didn't. She gets picked up, never to be seen again, not even her body found. Don't drink and hike, hitch people. I had a cardiac arrest about 4 years ago. Dropped dead-ish in the middle of my shift. Found out after I woke up about a week later that the manager who saw me fall was a former lifeguard and knew proper CPRB. An ambulance happened to be passing about 2 blocks away. Probably the best cardio unit in my state was a 10-minute ambulance ride from where it all happened. Walked out of the hospital about 2 weeks later, full recovery. My dad was going through severe depression 10 years ago and my life was equally shitty for a whole multitude of reasons, and it was rubbing off on me. I spent what felt like half an hour crying on the floor and working up the nerve to pull the trigger. Then when I finally did, the safety was on. I sold my gun the next morning. Wish my dad was able to say the same 3 years later. RIP. Edit. Thank you all for the kind words and even awards. I never expected this thread to explode in popularity the way it did. I've tried my best to respond to everybody, but if I missed you, that doesn't mean that I'm not thankful for your input. My great-grandfather was in the merchant navy in the war. He was in the engine room at the bottom of the ship and his friend came down to take over the shift early. Minutes later a torpedo struck and everyone at the bottom of the ship couldn't escape and died. My great-grandfather would have been one of them otherwise. Then, he was in the sea for a while and happened to be picked up by some Portuguese fishermen who saved him. Then, all part of the same tale, he escaped death again. He was meant to be on a flight back to the UK but got kicked off last minute to be replaced by VIPs. That plane got shot down and everyone died in it. Miss you great-grandpa X. My GF and I were going to see Cats, the movie. Our Uber pulls up and straight away we notice something about the driver. To this day, we can't articulate what it was, other than to say he just felt off. We got into his car, already hesitating and a touch anxious. He looks at us in the rear view mirror and makes a comment like, "Two lovely ladies in my car tonight," or some weird shit. A few minutes in, he makes another semi-sexual innuendo comment about riding with him. My friend notices the handle of a knife just poking out the side of his jacket. She says, "Hey, can we stop at 7-Eleven? We need to grab a Gatorade real quick." So we go in and refuse to come back out. We're considering whether to call the police or not. It was so creepy, but what would we say? Some dude was creepy to us. And while we're hesitating, he winds down his window, brandishes this fucking hunting knife at both of us, screams something about devil women and then just tears it out the parking lot. To this day, my GF and I are so thankful that we got out of that Uber. Otherwise we would have made it to the movies in time and we would have seen Cats. 4 Christmases ago I was in Mexico with mom, dad and brother doing some last-minute shopping at the local Walmart. We finished our shopping and went to the car. As soon as we were leaving, 2 trucks stopped right in front of the main Walmart entrance. They were a cartel and were hunting for the son of one of the opposing cartel's main dudes. They fired a fucking bazooka. I think they got the guy. And then bullets started flying everywhere. My dad was driving. He hit the gas. We almost crashed cause there was panic everywhere and we had a red light. The military showed up while we were driving away and a chase ensued. Luckily we were close to the house where we were staying and made it back quite fast. We heard gunshots for the next 3 hours. Dodged some bullets and even a missile that day. So about 20-something years ago, I was on my way to an interview through a suburb of Washington, D.C. That particular road has you driving at a not-so-slow speed, with no shoulders and sidewalks with many pedestrians. A woman standing on the sidewalk stepped backwards into the roadway just as I was approaching. Slammed on the brakes, honked, and she turned slightly. I stop and get out and she's rolling around clutching her foot, wailing about her foot getting rolled over. My heart is hammering. I have no idea how much trouble I'm in, and my brain is ticking away the time to the interview. Pedestrians kept coming up to her to tell her that they saw me run over her foot. Duh, of course you did. After a few minutes of this, the woman stood up, said, "Merry Christmas." It was definitely nowhere near Christmas, and walked away through the people standing there. I took my dodged bullet with much appreciation, got in my car, and drove away. I didn't get the job for what it's worth, but a couple of inches and my life could have changed for the worse in so many ways. My first husband and I were separated. He showed up at my apartment building unannounced and someone let him in because they recognized him from when he lived there. He wanted to come upstairs, but I met him in the lobby instead, where there were cameras and other people. He had never been violent towards me, but it didn't feel right to allow him into my space. He asked me to go for a drive with him and I refused. I offered to help him get help, mental health issues that he refused to treat. He declined and drove away. He was missing for a few days but turned up several states away visiting a friend. A few days after that he took his own life using a handgun. We found out later that he'd purchased the gun here, and headed straight out of town when I refused to get in the car with him. To this day, I am thankful that I never got in that car with him. He'd never even talked about buying a gun before. I had no idea he was armed. Who knows what would have happened. 5 of my buddies in high school invited me to go cruise around the backcountry roads because we had nothing else to do as teens in Iowa. I was getting ready to go and then decided I just was gonna stay home that night instead. Well, I'm glad I stayed home because their truck rolled several times after sliding out on a gravel road. There was a couple in the bed and they were ejected. One lost his left nut, one ended up in a coma, one ejected through the windshield and the rest had several broken bones and concussions. They all should have died and I'm very grateful they didn't, but I'm also grateful I chose not to go. Not me, but we were at Arches National Park once. One night there was a lightning storm. The next day we were talking to a park ranger and she told us that during the lightning storm there were people hiking back from Delicate Arch. A guy on the trail was hit by lightning, stopping his heart. Right behind him on the trail were 2 nurses who immediately started CPR. A minute or so later a cardiac surgeon hiked up and started working on him. They saved his life. Went to kill myself by putting a plastic bag over my head and tying it off. Figured it would be less messy to be found. My cat started going crazy on the other side of the door when I started to get lightheaded and feel sort of nauseous. I thought, oh right, you need your dinner and no one else will feed you, and I untied the bag to feed the cat. After the fact I realized my cat literally saved me from one of my lowest points. God, I miss that cat. Still can't believe I came that close. Edit. Hi friends. Thank you for all the warm thoughts and sharing stories of your save your pets. Do save your awards please, this is the most I've ever gotten, maybe give them to another comment that has yet to receive an award. Spread the smiles, love and support. Thank you so much, I'm truly touched by the human connection in this thread. I found a new job, boss seemed nice in the interview, started working and right from the start people weren't comfortable talking about the job, and you could literally smell the fear. Also there was very little work to do. My direct colleague was sick, and they wouldn't give me her phone number. I wanted to discuss a few strategies to move forward, but everyone kept dodging giving me her number. After 2 days I found I had a headache going there, which got worse during the day, so I quit. Company doesn't exist anymore. I guess you can't run a job agency without customers and everybody just pretending to work. I was living in Paris during the fall of 2015 for my semester study abroad in college. My apartment was right by République and every Friday night I had a standing reservation at Le Petit Cambodge, a local Cambodian restaurant that had the best wake up at 2 a.m. dream-worthy noodles. November 11th, my best friend who was studying in Scotland calls me crying that they've been dumped and was hoping I could come for the weekend. I was a little reluctant because I had wanted to go to the Eagles of Death metal concert at the Bataclan that Friday but hadn't gotten my tickets yet, so said sure and booked a flight for that Friday afternoon, November 13th. When I landed and made it to their apartment after we went out to dinner, I turned on my phone to hundreds of messages. Turns out both Le Petit Cambodge and the Bataclan had been targeted by ISIS and there were more terrorist hits going on in my neighborhood. The best thing my friend's ex did was dump them, otherwise I would have been either at dinner or a concert and more than likely wouldn't be here to write this. Once in my early 20s I ran into a crazy ex-girlfriend at the bar. She really wanted to hook up that night and I really wanted to, but I just started seeing someone new and declined. Then she basically started begging to go home with me and I just had a really bad feeling about it. It started to get a little weird, but the night went on and we went our separate ways. A couple weeks later she called me crying, saying she had no one to go to and asked if I could give her a ride to the abortion clinic. So I did, cause I knew she needed help, but I instantly knew if I went home with her that night she would have told me it's my kid. She tried to trap me. My ex. She turned out to be crazy, literally, not the kind of crazy label angry bitchy women get, but actually crazy. She ended up in a state mental hospital for at the very least 1 year mandatorily. But, while we were together, she threatened to kill herself if I left, multiple times. She broke into my apartment and forced me to let her stay the night and cuddle her, wouldn't let me sleep. Fun fact, she cheated on me and gave me gonorrhea. I'm stupid for not leaving her beforehand and just reporting her to the police, but that was the final straw. The bullet I dodged? I didn't get her pregnant. Thank God. In the 80s, my family was traveling through the Colorado mountains. We were traveling down a steep run between two semi-trailers, the front carrying steel beams and the back uncut timber logs. My dad suddenly got really nervous, later telling us he heard a voice yell for him to get out of that lane now. He pulled into the middle lane and started to pass the semi. About 10 seconds later the back tractor smashed into the trailer in front. Still don't know if his brakes gave out or if he fell asleep, but had we stayed we would have all died in a crushed van cube. Didn't happen to me, but my sister's ex-husband. He served in the Marines. One night in Afghanistan, he and his squadmates were awoken and told that enemies were seen nearby and were to go check it out. They searched the area on foot where they were last seen, and it's still late at night, nothing was found. They went back to their base and went back to sleep. Well, in the morning they had other soldiers check it out. Turns out that enemies were indeed there at some point and multiple IED landmines were found with soldier footprints all around them. It was my ex-brother-in-law's and his squad's footprints and they managed to somehow miss every one of them.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video. And if you are new, Subscribe and click on the bell icon.